This is Inside the Right. All right, Tim, you know better than I would as a longtime Republican, but I've watched Trump and Hannity try to make laughing Kamala a thing. I've watched some congressional Republicans try to make border czar a thing. Andy Ogles is trying to impeach her. Trump's campaign is trying to sue her. Nothing seems to be sticking right now. They absolutely seem to be flailing. So I don't want to bury the lead here. Do these Republicans truly not know how to run against Kamala? Because that does seem to be the impression that I'm getting.
They don't right now, Brian. And look, they had this frame of a race in their mind. I was had James Carville on over on the Bulwark earlier this week, and he was famous for "It's the economy, stupid." That was his frame in '92. Like their frame of this election, the Trump people, the MAGA world, was strong versus weak. That was whether or not you buy it or whatever. Like they were saying that the world's on fire and inflation is out of control, and Joe Biden is old and weak, right? And Donald Trump is this strong, tough guy who pretends to be tough. That's why Hulk Hogan is at the convention, right?
Right.
And then you have this assassination attempt that he survives, and that like plays right into the hands of this frame, right?
Totally.
And
Yeah.
so they're riding so high at the RNC convention, that they're just like, we're the tough guys, we're gonna be strong, we're gonna beat you up. And then this whole dynamic changes. And it's really hard to run strong versus weak when all of a sudden you're running against somebody 20 years younger than you, somebody that was a prosecutor, somebody that was tough, putting people in jail, tough on crime, tough on criminals, tough on sex abusers, which you are, right? Like that frame doesn't work. And so you got to come up with something else. And so right now they're just throwing stuff against the wall to
Right.
see what sticks, and they got nothing. And a lot of the stuff's racist, and a lot of the stuff's misogynist, and some of it. There's some stuff we can talk about that I think might end up being a little bit more effective in the future. But like right now, they got nothing. And the best evidence of that is Trump's bleats on his social media feed. While he's golfing, are like mostly about Biden still.
Right.
He just-
Right. They
he
don't
hasn't
know how to
even
run
it
against
hasn't
Trump.
even sunk in for him yet. But
They
I think that's a pretty bad sign.
They so don't know how to run against Kamala Harris that they're like, well, let's just keep running against Joe Biden then. Chris LaCivita, Trump's campaign manager, I think it is.
Top advisor.
Top advisor. He's still tweeting about Joe Biden. It's like, man, you can run that race if you want to, but that's not who Americans are going to vote between when November rolls around.
Yeah, Lasavita even tweeted, this is just a funny quick aside, all caps moron at Pete Buttigieg on Monday.
Yeah.
And just as somebody used to work on campaigns, it's not a great sign that you've got a clear message and that your message is a discipline and that things are running on all cylinders when your top campaign advisor is on Twitter like tweeting moron at people randomly. It's a sign that they're a little flustered over there, I think.
Especially of all people, who is not a moron. It's Pete.
Yeah.
Like of all people,
like,
who like that's
all right,
not.
good
gonna
luck
land
with that
there.
one. People
Yeah.
are just a moron. Like
Yeah.
I think let's go back to the drawing board. I think they're spending a lot of time at the drawing board down in Mar-a-Lago right now.
To that point, then, do you think that the Trump campaign regrets the choice of J.D. Vance? And I ask this because J.D. Vance was a reflection of the fact that the Trump campaign was not just confident; they were cocky. They chose somebody who offered nothing extra. They didn't choose somebody who would expand their coalition. He didn't come from a swing state. He's not a moderate. He's not a different religion or race or anything. I mean, he is just a carbon copy of Donald Trump himself. And Trump was just so sure that he would win that he's like, I don't even need to expand my coalition. I just need somebody who's exactly like me. It's just more me for the base, and just double down on that strategy. But do you think that, given the fact that he's no longer running against Biden, and suddenly all of these states that seemed lost to the Democrats are not only in play but very winnable because of Kamala, do you think that they regret the decision to double down on the Trump of it all and choose J.D. Vance?
I do, and I think it's actually even worse than you just laid out. You laid out a pretty bad picture, and I think it's even worse than that because J.D. Vance is full Trump, full MAGA ideologically, but
Without any of the charisma.
exactly. He doesn't have that. Like, look, the Trump's whatever you want to call it charisma. It doesn't work on me. I find him repulsive. I've always hated him. Never did anything for me. But just objectively speaking, like he's a performer. He was on The
Right.
Apprentice. He has. He makes jokes on stage. They don't laugh for me, but you notice that the people in the crowd are laughing. When
Right.
JD Vance makes jokes on stage, he makes himself laugh very awkwardly, actually, and doesn't make the crowd laugh. Like he doesn't have, that little je ne sais quoi or whatever it is, the performer's mien that Trump does. And so that like really leaves him with nothing. And he's even worse on abortion than Trump,
Right.
right? Like in addition to having worse personality, in addition to being full MAGA, full conspiracy on all of these extreme policy issues, Trump, obviously is responsible for the overturn of Roe v. Wade, so he carries that baggage with him. But JD Vance is like on the record explicitly talking about how women who were raped, should have to, that he's sorry that it's inconvenient, but that they're gonna have to carry their child to term. Like that's insane. That is insane levels of baggage in this campaign. When there's already a big gender gap. So yeah, I think it's bad. And then lastly, to your point about the map. This was really going to be a race about the upper Midwest. Had Biden stayed on the ticket, it was going to be really, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin were going to be the key states. Those are still going to be key states, but they thought that was like the dagger, in Trump world, and so they kind of convinced themselves that JD was from Ohio, from the same region, might help them with these white working class voters. I never really bought that, but like that was their theory. But now I think that with Kamala at the top of the ticket, it really opens up Georgia, Arizona, North Carolina, Nevada, places where JD Vance not only brings nothing, but is an anchor.
Right, and we may very well see a vice presidential pick from one of those states themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, Josh Shapiro from Pennsylvania, Mark Kelly from Arizona, Gretchen Whitmer from Michigan. Sticking on
Roy
the
Cooper,
electoral,
North Carolina, I think
Yeah.
is an outside chance. Yeah.
Sticking with the electoral politics of it all, we just got our first polls since Biden announced that he wouldn't seek re-election. The most recent was the Reuters Ipsos poll that showed Kamala up by 2 against Trump, and that was after the last poll showed them tied, and the one before that showed Trump up by 1. So the momentum is clearly just going in one direction. It seems to me that Trump's number in these polls is his ceiling, and that Kamala's is her floor. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, 42 or 44, whatever that was the ceiling, but yeah, 46, 47, it just feels like his number, right?
Right.
These data analyst guys at Civics, were kind of testing Kamala, even before the President Biden made his decision, and over a 2-week period, what they noticed, was that Trump's number stayed at 46. And Kamala's number went up from 44 to 48 in their poll. And when you looked at the numbers, a lot of that was based on people from the Democratic coalition that were traditionally Democrats who had issues with Biden for whatever reason coming home. Black
Right.
voters, Hispanic voters, young voters in particular, independents. And so I do think that Trump is a little static. And the other number, again, just going back to the states that I think we've seen so far, I will caution. I think that polls are going to be super volatile. Like we've had the most insane 3 weeks like in American politics and since the 1960s.
Yeah.
So like, it takes time for stuff to settle in. I'll feel like more assured in my analysis of polls a few weeks from now or a month from now. But again, a Georgia poll comes out that had her down 1, I believe, today. And that was a state that was feeling like it was off the map for
Right.
for Biden. And I think a big part of that is again those same demos in Atlanta. You have obviously a big black population, a lot of college educated white women. I think that Kamala can run up the numbers up even greater than some other Democrats have with that group. Younger voters, a lot of colleges there. So I think that that you're already seeing the coalescing around her reflecting the numbers, and I think that she has more room to grow.
And by the way, that's before they've even really gotten a chance to hear her in this new position. I mean,
Yeah.
you and I were talking off camera about her speech in Wisconsin. I mean, she blew the roof off that place. I could not imagine a better speech. And I have maintained that Kamala is actually uniquely positioned to take on Trump. You mentioned this before. She's a prosecutor. He's a felon. In that rally, she led with that point. Here's a quick clip of that moment.
So as Leah told you, before I was elected vice president, before I was elected United States Senator, I was elected Attorney General of the state of California, and I was a courtroom prosecutor before then. And in those roles, I took on perpetrators of all kinds. Predators who abused women, fraudsters who ripped off consumers, cheaters who broke the rules for their own gain. So hear me when I say, I know Donald Trump's type.
So clearly she's leaning into it. I mean, that was at the top of the speech, and she went right into the prosecutor versus felon framing. As a longtime Republican, first of all, how weird is it for you that the Law and Order Party's nominee is the felon and the lawless Democrats are running a prosecutor? And second of all, do you think that this is the right tack here? Do you think that this is going to be the most effective tack for her to run?
It's not weird for me because I've been dying for this. I've been dying for that clip. Thank you. We needed that. Look, I'm a former Republican, but I'm an ever-Trumper. And like my whole advocacy for almost a decade now, because that's how long this asshole has been around.
Yeah.
Has been focused on him. And it's important to not cede the field, the rhetorical battleground to his nastiness,
right?
And it's been critical. It's critical to push back on it and to have a messenger who can do it in a way that's compelling, that people can understand. And I think that the prosecutor versus felon thing is a nice little bumper sticker. I like that. But the thing that I really like about that messaging that she's starting to lean into is that it's not just the democracy part of it, which I think is an important part, but it's like, I prosecuted people that were frauds that screwed over regular people. I like that. She gets into the Trump University,
right.
of it. And I'm defending regular people against frauds, that are trying that.
Right. It's not just Trump. It's what Trump represents to the broader electorate.
Yeah, and like what that means for real people, right? So it's not just like a campaign that's just like Kamala cop's going to put Trump in jail, and that appeals to me. Okay, that appeals to me quite a bit actually.
Yeah.
But I don't know that that's the sale for low info swing voters who aren't as obsessed with this stuff as some of us are. So I think that if she can though transition it into, I've fought for people against corrupt jerks. I've fought for victims, against people that commit sexual assault, right? Like that, I think, brings it back in a way that's very compelling and much better than what we've been saying.
I completely agree. Now, Tim, we've spoken in the past, and actually Joe Biden was especially solid with your people, the Bulwark type folks. In fact, he was stronger really with you guys than his own base. It was young people and people of color that he was losing support from, and that that's the base of the Democratic Party. But now how does Kamala Harris fare with your people, and what does she need to do to consolidate the same degree of support that Biden was able to enjoy?
Yeah. I mean, look, Kamala, I think, is going to be solid with, there are kind of two categories of never-Trumpers to think about. One are the people like me that, like, basically, he so repulsed us, like, maybe you didn't literally leave the party, like go re-register, but these are the people that like voted for the Democrats in 18, maybe they're for Mayor Pete or Amy in 20, right, and then in 22, so like these are people that now have been voting for Democrats for a while. And Kamala is going to be totally fine with that group. She's well within the mainstream of the Democratic Party. The next group is the other group we've been talking about a lot. It's just the Haley voters, right? Which are people that don't like Trump, but are conservative and just still haven't, they haven't felt comfortable going there, like voting for a Democrat, right? Maybe they left the top of the ballot blank and voted for a Republican down below. They were the types of people we talked about maybe in Georgia, for example, that voted for Brian Kemp for governor, but couldn't vote for Herschel Walker, so they went for Warnock, right? Like, so these are your more traditional conservatives. And I do think that was a strength for Biden. I think that Biden was doing well with that group, and that Kamala's got some work to do with that group. And I think that she can do it. I think that she is going to have to really lean into how she's been a strong supporter of the U.S. role in the world. I think this is where foreign policy can play to her strength. She's gone to the Munich Security Conference twice. You kind of speak to this fact that that Trump and these guys over here want to be isolationists and want to let Putin run roughshod over Europe, and where she wants to stand with our allies. I think that's one good way. Some of these other issues that Biden had been talking about, tariffs, for example. I think that there are ways for the vice president to reach that group, but I think that it's going to be, something that we're going to have to do a lot of work on this year. And I think that becomes a much more key kind of swing demo than it would have been had Biden stayed on the top of the ticket.
And so, given this new reality, what's your plan over at the Bulwark? You're in a very a unique position, but an important one as we head toward November, because there is this faction of people that will, in large part, be those who determine the outcome of this election. I mean, if the Democratic base is able to come home and Donald Trump has his base who's been with him all along, then there is that sliver of people in the middle who remain as important as ever. And given that, they might have been a little bit more predisposed to come on board with Biden as opposed to Kamala, what's next for you guys, and how do you plan to make sure that Donald Trump never gets close to the White House again?
Yeah, sure. Well, there are two elements of it. I mean, I'm doing the media side of the bulwark, so I do think it's worth talking about the activism side. One of my colleagues, Sarah Longwell, runs a political action group called Republican Voters Against Trump, and I did that in 2020, but now I'm just doing media stuff. But they're going to run the same playbook in 2020. But I think a key part there is they're going to go out and recruit regular Nikki Haley type Republican voters who look and sound Republican, and to have them cut ads and explain why they're going to vote for Kamala. And it might just be because they hate Trump for reason X, Y, or Z. I hope that they're going to recruit people that also can say, hey, I like this about Kamala. I like A, B, and C. Maybe it's that foreign policy. Maybe it's some other issues that we could get into. Maybe it's abortion, because certainly there's some pro-choice Republicans as well that you could talk to. So I think that is key on the advocacy side. And on the media side, look, I want to talk about, there are elements of Kamala Harris's background that I just don't think people know. And on the prosecution side, I think it's important to educate people. What was she doing as a prosecutor and as an AG? To your kind of cheeky remark earlier about how she is a law and order candidate, like she is, right? And I think that speaks to the Nikki Haley voter. And back to the foreign policy, I think that there's, how many people do you think know that Kamala Harris went and met with our NATO allies multiple times, in Europe to, kind of help be a point person for pushing back against Russia? I don't know. I was talking with one of our advisors earlier today, about how we could maybe do some interviews about that or do some articles to kind of educate people about that. So I think that is going to be an important, that's not her top line message at a stump speech, but that's going to be an important thing to do in interviews, in advertising, to kind of make sure that the Wall Street Journal reading Nikki Haley voting Republican who hates Donald Trump knows that, knows these parts of Kamala's background that I think will be appealing to them.
Yeah, that's a great point. And look, our coalition, we have strange bedfellows in this coalition. The fact that I'm doing a show with a Jeb Bush advisor is a testament to exactly that. So people will be all over the spectrum, but that's the point. I mean, that the whole point is building a vast pro-democracy spectrum from that ranges from folks like you at the Bulwark all the way to the AOCs and Bernie Sanders of the party. So very important to make sure that we do everything we can to, get the message across that Donald Trump is dangerous. We have to do everything we can to make sure he doesn't get into the Oval Office again, and to elevate voices across the spectrum that are going to be important for different groups of people. So with that said, for those watching right now, to support the work that Tim and his team at the Bulwark are doing, please subscribe. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Tim Miller.
This is Inside the Right.